starting. There's a few more seats over here. And my name is Shai Arkin. I'm a biochemist / virologist. I am from the Faculty of Natural Sciences at the Edmund J. Saffer campus. Some of you might remember me from my stint on the dark side. I was the Vice President for Research and Development for several years. And I'm trying to ask myself all the time, why am I emceeing this event tonight? And I came up with 4 answers. First, it's a futile exercise to say no to Nathalie. Just doesn't work, okay? Doesn't work. Second, as a starving academic, I never say no to free food, okay? But now seriously, it's a wonderful opportunity to be amongst friends, amongst the friends of the Hebrew University from all over the world, amongst the American friends, the Canadian friends, the British friends, the European friends, les amis français, the Australian friends, all the... No, I never forget the Australians, okay? I do. It's really wonderful to be amongst the friends of the Hebrew University whose generosity is only matched by one thing, and that is their foresight. So it's amazing to be here with you. And finally, the best reason for me to be here is an opportunity to hear some of the most exciting stuff that takes place. And it's not just the best science from the Hebrew University. No, let's remove the qualification. It's the best science, period. It's the best education, period. It's the most impactful things that you will notice about the Hebrew University. And what it gives is boasting rights to the Hebrew University leadership for the years to come. So this is really very, very exciting. So I'm seeing that Brenda is looking at me, with reproachment. So I'll try to be an obedient and obsequious MC for the rest of the evening. So I'll now turn back to business. So to start it off, we'll learn from Dr. Nathan Steiger how historic climate data combined with natural artifacts can help us understand regional likelihood for long-term drought, perhaps even enabling us to make better informed water policy decisions. Nathan recently joined the university as a senior lecturer at the Frady and Nadine Harman Institute of Earth Sciences. He's also a member of our Climate Science Center and an associate research scientist at the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory of Columbia University. Then we'll learn what happens when we notice something uncommon in our surroundings and why it matters. Our teacher on the illusion of diversity will be Dr. Rasha Kardosh, who did her PhD and is now doing her postdoctoral studies in social psychology, and who will soon be heading to NYU for a prestigious provost postdoctoral fellowship. So we have an exciting evening ahead of us. Nathan, please.
Journey. Let me take you on a journey. Are we okay? All right. A journey of sound. And a journey to North America. We see from space that the eastern part of North America is green and wet, and the western part is brown and dry. The writer and environmentalist Wallace Stegner wrote that aridity is the West's ultimate unity, because in other ways, it has a bewildering variety of its landscapes. And cutting through the American West, the arid American West, is a river, the Colorado River. It's like the Nile of the West. 40 million people get water from the Colorado River. People in LA, San Diego, Las Vegas, Tucson, Phoenix, Albuquerque, Salt Lake, Denver, 40 million people. And as this river cuts through some of the most stunning landscapes in the world, it actually irrigates 6 million acres of farmland. Not everyone who lives in the West knows about its fundamental aridity. This is Palm Springs, California. It's one of the driest cities in the United States. It receives on average 12 centimeters or 5 inches of rain per year. Of course, the majority of precipitation, or a majority of water actually, goes to agriculture. Take California, for example. 90% of water use in California goes to agriculture. And then the majority of that agricultural output goes to feed cattle, not people directly. Now, the Imperial Valley of California, it's hot, it's arid, and it uses an enormous amount of the Colorado River. This is where the Colorado River ought to run into the sea, but it doesn't. It hasn't for decades. The river is dead before it ever arrives. Why is the river dead? Ultimately, it goes back to law. The fundamental foundation of Western water law is something called the Colorado River Compact. And for this compact, what they did is they took 20 years of data of the Colorado River, of flow of the Colorado River at the beginning of the 20th century. And then based on that data, they partitioned the average flow of the river among the western U.S. states. Now, they did this, they didn't partition a percentage, but the amount, because they were confident that the river was consistent. What has it been since that time? Nothing at all, like the early 20th century. Few years even reach that average value that they estimated. Now, perhaps the contemporary period is what's unusual. Perhaps in the past, the river ran full. Let's go back in time. And to go back in time, we're going to use trees like these. These are bristlecone pines. They grow in the mountains of California, Nevada, and Utah. Some of them are 5,000 years old. Now, we all know that, everyone knows that you can count the rings of a tree to know its age. But you can also know what climate that tree has experienced by looking at the widths of those rings. Because in wet years, the trees put on nice, fat, happy rings. And in dry years, those rings are very thin. This particular tree lived through one of the worst megadroughts of the past 1,000 years, the late 16th century megadrought. Now, we can non-destructively sample trees, like my friend Kevin here is doing, using a small boring tool. And we can extract a core, a very small sample from the tree that doesn't hurt it, and use that measurement, use that core to actually measure the width of those rings going back in time. Now, using this technique, scientists have been able to sample tens of thousands of trees all over the world. We can do this actually on glaciers and on ice sheets. We can drill down into the ice and extract a core. And those annual layers in this core of ice can tell us about past climate. We can sample tropical corals that grow in the ocean. We can drill down, extract a core, we can measure it. And using this kind of data, all these kinds of data, we can construct a network of what we call paleoclimate proxy data. Now, one of my expertises is actually to take this data and use statistical techniques called data assimilation and to fuse that with global climate models. What do we get out of this process? We get global climate going back in time. Using my work, we can know temperature, precipitation, winds going back thousands of years. This is the year 1000. What did global temperatures look like in 1000? Here it is. In the North American Southwest, let's go back there and look at what drought has been like going back in time. This is showing drought severity, so the droughts are in brown. And the green periods are those periods that don't have droughts. Now notice this big green spike right at the beginning. This is the period that was measured for the Colorado River Compact, the wettest period in 1,000 years. If we go back into the beginning of this record, though, what do we see? We see mega droughts. We see these multi-decadal droughts, more severe than any that were experienced in the 20th century. Now, why did these mega droughts happen? And why did they appear in the distant past? It's a good question. And it's something that I pursue in my research. Now, the main cause can actually be traced back to the tropical Pacific. Normally, there are enormous clouds in the tropical Pacific, enormous amounts of convection. And these clouds are so big and the convection is so great that it's able to generate waves in the atmosphere, pressure waves. A single wave is the size of the United States. And these waves can push around storms, and when there's a La Nina, it can actually bring up cold water and then push these storms further towards the west. That changes where the waves go, and that changes where the storms go. And that means that the North American Southwest will dry out because the storms get pushed toward the poles. The same mechanism I've discovered actually causes megadrought also in South America. And in fact, this same mechanism can cause megadrought to happen at once. Simultaneous megadrought in both North and South America. Now, there's another factor that's at play here. A small factor, a relatively small factor, but important, is the sun. The sun varies in a small amount, the amount of energy that it puts out. And when it's putting out more energy, it increases evaporation, and it dries out the west. Another factor that's important is actually volcanic eruptions, but really big ones. So volcanic eruptions that are big enough that put out enough ash to actually go into the upper atmosphere, they can block the sun. And actually the effect is to counteract droughts. It's actually to make it wet. But in order to cause a mega drought, what you need is a long period without these volcanic eruptions. And they're rare. They only happen every few decades or so. And so if by chance you have a period without these big volcanic eruptions, when you have sunlight that's putting out just a little bit more energy, and when you have unusually strong and frequent La Niñas, these three factors together, these are what cause megadroughts. Let's come back to the present. Central Chile in the past 12 years has experienced its worst drought in the past 100 years. In the North American Southwest, there's a mega drought. It's been going on for 22 years. In fact, it's so severe, it ranks among the worst droughts that has been experienced in the North American Southwest in the past 1,000 years, those ancient droughts. What I'm showing here is the Colorado River, and it's forming Lake Mead, which is the water here, and it's sitting behind Hoover Dam. The bleached rock that you see, that actually marks the high water mark of Lake Mead. And so for reference here, I have the Statue of Liberty. Lake Mead, during this megadrought, has lost a Statue of Liberty's worth of water. Now, the natural factors that I talked about are the primary cause of this megadrought, but 42% of it is actually attributed to global warming. Why is this? It's because as we warm the atmosphere, that increases evaporation, and it dries out the American West. Now, we can't do much about those natural factors, but we can do something about global warming. Global warming has taken what would have been a moderate drought, and it's turned it into a mega drought. We can have an impact. We can change how energy is produced. We can reduce travel that's based on fossil fuels. We can reduce the consumption of stuff that's made with fossil fuels. The future, much of it, is up to us. Thank you.
Okay, hi. Let's do something together. I'd like to ask you to try imagine walking around in your neighborhoods back at home. Okay? Where is your favorite grocery store? You're walking towards it now. And then to your kids' or grandkids' favorite playground. Now, try to estimate, on a typical walk, how many individuals from minority groups you would encounter along the way. And if you're anything like me, or the vast majority of our participants, you're overestimating this percentage, and yes, even if you yourself belong to this minority group. Now, forgot to. Why would I say this? Because one of the basic principles of cognitive science is that our minds are tuned towards what is uncommon or unexpected. If we see a green tree with a few red apples, those red apples will stand out to us. We're gonna be likely to notice them. Memory works the same. If something unexpected occurs, we're gonna be more likely to remember that event. And this is what cognitive psychologists call salience, our mind's basic tuning, tendency to highlight what is uncommon or unexpected. Now, let's think about our social worlds. Go back to the neighborhoods. Individuals from minority groups are, by definition, exactly that. They are less common. And in many situations, they are also unexpected. That's why, in our work, we suggest that minorities are salient in our minds. They are we are more likely to notice seeing them, and we are more likely to remember seeing them. And as a result, we'll end up overestimating their prevalences in our environments, which basically creates an illusion of diversity when we think about our neighborhoods, our workplaces, and our campuses. We're going to be more likely to think that they are more diverse than they truly are. So the first thing we did in order to test this idea was to go to students here at the Hebrew University and ask them something very similar to what I just asked you. We simply asked them to try to estimate the percentage of Palestinian students studying at the Hebrew University. And we did this both with Jewish students and with Palestinian students, those who themselves belong to the minority group. And here's what we saw. So the real percentage back then when we ran the study was around 10%. And when we asked Jewish participants to try to estimate this prevalence, we get an average of 32%. That's 3 times as many. And when we ask Palestinian students to estimate this as well, we get something very similar. And to tell you the truth, we were expecting an overestimation, but 3 times as many seemed like a lot. We could not believe our results, and we ran these studies 3 times in order to make sure. So what we did was to try to understand how is our mind doing this. What are the cognitive processes that are making us overestimate the percentage of minorities in our environments and basically think that our environments are more diverse than they truly are? And to do this, we designed a new paradigm. And these studies we ran in the United States, both on white American participants and black American participants. And this is how the paradigm looks. Okay, so we made these matrices. And in these matrices, we could set in advance the percentage of individuals from minority groups participants see in a study. And for example, in this study, participants see many of these matrices, and we set the percentage to be 25%. And at the end of the study, we tell them, say, out of all the pictures you've seen throughout the study, how many were Black American? And what we got is that while the real percentage is 25%, first, white participants estimate this to be 43%. We also asked them to try to estimate the percentage of white people they saw. And the real percentage is 75%. They think it's 56. So while 1/4 of the faces they saw was Black American, they thought it was half. And what happens when we ask Black participants to do this exact same study? We get basically the same result. So now using this paradigm, we could test how is our mind doing this? Where in the cognitive system is it happening? Is it perception? Is it because we are more likely to notice individuals from minority groups while we are walking around an environment? And the answer seems yes. We also asked, is this memory? Is it also because we are more likely to remember seeing individuals from minority groups? And the answer seems to be also yes. And the last thing we tested, and this is important, is social knowledge. Our social knowledge is basically our understanding of the structure of our societies. We have a lot of information that, because we are very experienced in our societies, we know which groups we would expect to see in which places. And having individuals from minority groups defies these expectations also makes them salient. So this also plays a role. And what we see is that minorities are salient not only because they are less frequent, but also because they are unexpected. Okay, so we think that our environments are more diverse than they truly are. But the question that arises here is, okay, so does this matter? Does this actually change our opinions, our social attitudes? And to test this, we ran this study. We showed participants these matrices again, But this time we told them these are students in an American college, in a small American college. And we set the percentage of black people to be 5% of the faces. In the other condition, we did not show them these pictures. We simply told them that there is this American college and 5% of the students are black Americans. And what we see is that in this condition, participants think that 15% of the students are black Americans. So again, 3 times as many. And they were also much less likely to support diversity-promoting policies. So this basic perception that our environments are more diverse than they truly are is consequential on our attitudes and on our opinions. Now, finally, the last question that I think everybody in the room must be wondering is this happening to me? And I think the answer, and I'm sorry to say, probably yes, and to me as well. I've already told you that in all our experiments, we tested participants from the majority group and participants who themselves belong to the minority group, and we get the same results. But across all our studies, we also asked participants whether they are liberal or conservative, how they feel about this minority group, whether they perceive it as threatening, and many other variables. And what we see is that none of these matters. Minority salience is something that's likely to be happening to anyone. In fact, across tens of studies and over 1,000 participants, we see that 83% of participants show the minority salience effect. So this is something that's probably happening to most of us most of the time. So what can we do about it? And I thought a lot about this, and I think the answer divides into 2 parts. First, if you're ever in a water cooler conversation or a dinner party, and somebody says, most of the new hires at my organization are diversity hires, you should say, are you sure? Let's count. And you're probably going to be right. But also, if you're a decision maker, and I assume many of you in this room are, it is very important to base decisions on the actual prevalences and not on our perceptions of these prevalences, because our perceptions are biased. And also, it's very important to make those numbers readily available for the public, because when they are not available, this basic cognitive bias that's stemming from the basic architecture of our cognitive system is going to bias public opinions. And that's it. Thank you so much. If you'd like to read more about our work, you can simply scan this page and feel free to reach out to me. Thank you so much.
Well, that's just amazing. I don't know about you, but these are very important take-home lessons. For example, Nathan, one of my take-home lessons would be that it would be environmentally sound for the Hebrew University to purchase electric cars for its faculty members. I think that would be a good idea, no? Okay. So again, thanks Rasha and Nathan for those amazing discoveries and insights. We've all been increasingly hearing about big data. This is the digital revolution and the ability to aggregate, integrate, and analyze an unimaginable quantity of data, which has unleashed a wealth of life-improving capabilities, and we're only at the beginning of this revolution. Though she's currently at a conference at Oxford, we didn't want you to miss meeting Professor Michal Rosenzweig, Director of AI for Accelerated Healthcare and Life Sciences Discovery at IBM Research, and a new member of the Faculty of Medicine who will be involved in its Center for Computational Medicine. Michal is a computational physicist who will share with us virtually how AI is already being used to accelerate drug discovery. After that, you'll meet Mo Wengner and Zvi Michelson, who are working to ensure that the next generation of all backgrounds can be part of the digital revolution. Mo, a computer science and cognitive science recent graduate, and Zvi, a graduate student in computer science, founded 4Start, a program that teaches youth from underrepresented communities the basics of coding together with a healthy dose of self-confidence. Continuing the theme of impacting the next generation, we'll then hear from Ariela Lehman, an alumna of the Revivim Teacher Training Program who has leveraged her love of teaching and her master's in Jewish history to help her high school students appreciate the beauty of Jewish culture. Please.
Good evening. I've got some great news to share with you. We're expecting many wonderful scientific discoveries these days emerging at an unforeseen pace thanks to AI technologies. Come join me behind the scenes of how scientific discoveries are made to get a sense of how we got here and where we are headed along this exciting journey. In ancient times, a scientific discovery was made through experimentation. If you take opium poppy, for instance, people probably stumbled upon it by coincidence in different parts of the world long ago. This pain relief drug is among the world's oldest known drugs. In fact, remains related to opium usage by humans were found in an Egyptian tomb from the 15th century BC. The seminal work of Sir Francis Bacon, Novum Organum, published 400 years ago, introduced the scientific method to the world and marked the change of an era. His work introduced rigor to scientific discovery with a process that starts with a question, followed by a study that leads to a hypothesis that is tested in an experiment that is the foundation of a new theory. This is the era where models of the atoms were studied, the periodic table was discovered, scientists discovered molecules that are combinations of different atoms. Going back to the poppy example, this is the time when the extraordinary pharmacist Friedrich Sertuner successfully isolated morphine from opium poppy in its pure form. In his scientific quest for finding the optimal dose, he performed experiments on various human beings, first and foremost on himself, which made him an addict who advocated for safe use of this powerful drug. Computational methods played a significant role in the next phase of scientific discoveries. Once methods were developed to extract structure of molecules from X-ray images, to compute masses from mass spectrometer, scientists who suspected that morphine-like molecules naturally exist in our brain found endorphins and were able to sequence their chains of amino acids. Credit for these findings goes to a whole group of cooperating researchers. I will not list them all, just mention the two professors from University of Aberdeen who were the first to isolate the molecule from a soup made of pig's brain 50 years ago. What happens when computers are abandoned and machine learning technology evolves? We are expected to a whole new level of understanding that can only be created from the multiple sources of masses of data accumulated over time. Initial breakthroughs were in analyzing text. Large digital cohorts of textual write-ups were among the first publicly available datasets. Over a decade ago, as a young postdoc at UC Berkeley and later at the Hebrew University's Computer Science Department, we introduced machine learning models to analyze large text corpora called the author-topic models and showed their usefulness in different tasks, such as predicting content that authors will generate and automatically proposing links to websites with relevant content. As large genomic datasets were made available, the same models were adapted for discovering new patterns of gene expressions or mutations associated with various illnesses. Such studies are typically performed per domain and data model. And today, as we speak, we are experiencing a grand convergence of knowledge in biology, chemistry, and medicine, with data-driven models applied to different modalities that lead to a whole new level of discovery. The world of drugs requires an understanding of the chemical properties and their impact on the human body, from the molecular level and the physics of interactions, to learning from digital pathology of tissue, medical images of organs, and blood tests, and other measures from the whole body. Current technologies enable this convergence. The cloud environment enables new scale of computing. AI technologies such as deep learning and transformers are showing promising results in many different fronts, from finding protein structure from its sequence, to generating new molecules given a protein target, to inferring biomarkers from high-dimensional retrospective data. Let me leave you with two concrete examples of the current exciting converging phase that are just the tip of the iceberg. Example number one. A team from the Hebrew University's Department of Chemistry and Faculty of Medicine published a paper in PNAS last year about a generic methodology that extracts structural data from living intact cells for any protein of interest. They showed how their method reveals the full structure of certain proteins of severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, SARS-CoV-2, previously unknown due to the instability of these proteins outside of the cellular context. Example number two. I have worked with my IBM research team on developing AI technologies to automatically detect breast cancer in medical images from screening exams. In fact, in two recent publications in radiology, one with Asuta from Israel and the other with Johns Hopkins University, we have shown that the technology is on par with radiologists' performance. In a recent study with my PhD student from the Faculty of Medicine and other colleagues, we were able to show that when combining images with clinical history, the technology can already relatively accurately identify the pathology type of a lump based on the screening exam data. This finding holds the promise of identifying prognosis biomarkers in clinical data and/or the images. The possibilities are endless. To rephrase Talmudic saying, if all the seeds were ink and all the reeds writing pens and the heaven and earth scrolls and the people of the world were scribes, there would not be enough room to write all the scientific new facts regarding health, disease, and their remedies that we are about to discover.
Now, whoa. Okay. So, we're here to actually talk about the people. We're not talking about the fact that every child needs an adult who believes in her, okay? As a first-year computer science student, I doubted I could make it. I truly believed that I wasn't smart enough, so I had no motivation to study. And my poor grades seemed as further proof that indeed just wasn't for me. One day, my mom sat me down and she asked me, "What's going on? In high school, you overcame any math obstacle that was on your way. What's the difference?" And she was right. I did go from 30 to 100 in math through my own sheer willpower. And I realized that the difference was my self-efficacy. You see, during high school, I believed that I could make it. And that gave me the willpower to study. And when I studied, I succeeded. The second thing I realized is that overcoming those math challenges back in high school gave me an experience of success that in turn led me to enroll to computer science, so thanks, Mom. And that's also when it hits me that not everyone is as lucky as I was to have grown up in a supportive environment with the resources to pursue a career in STEM. And I discovered I really wanted to make that option accessible to many more kids currently stuck in their teen years, not believing what their future holds. For too many kids, becoming a part of this startup nation is far, far beyond their reach, or not even within their awareness. And it's not because they can't do it. It's important that because they've never been offered the tools or the belief that they can succeed. So right then and there, in my second year of computer science studies at the Hebrew U, I decided to start an initiative for teaching kids to code, to give them the experience of success, and build their lifelong sense of self-efficacy in the process.
I reached the same destination as Moore did, but I came from it from a completely different path. The year before I began my studies in university, I spent a year volunteering with the Jewish community in South Africa, in Cape Town. It was a wonderful year, but everything I did during that year was outward focused. I volunteered with the community, I taught in school, I studied with people in the evening, everything outward focused. When I returned home and began my studies, I got a shulich scholarship, so thank God I didn't have to worry about finances. But in university, everything is inward focused. I'm working on my own grades, I'm working on my own tests, I'm studying for my own exams, everything is inward focused. It's exactly the opposite. So when Moore, an acquaintance from computer science department, shared with me her idea about teaching kids how to code with a healthy dose of self-empowerment, it was just what I had been looking for. And so was she, but that's for later. We joined forces and we launched ForStart. It's a nonprofit organization for opening doors into the wonderful world of computers for youth from underrepresented groups. So we started to develop our concept. We set out to find the kids that needed this upward mobility opportunity the most. We wanted to teach them to code at the Hebrew University campus and empower them to succeed all along the process. Okay, nice idea. How exactly were we going to translate this vision into reality? Well, we began knocking on doors and sharing our concept with anyone who would listen. To secure on-campus classrooms, we talked with the Dean of the Computer Science University and with the Asper HUJI Innovate. Then we headed for the Jerusalem municipality to help us find the kids who needed what we had to offer. When we shared our idea with the Jerusalem municipality, their response was something along the lines of, listen, we have groups of kids that you're talking about, they aren't the best fit for your program. Here we have some stronger kids, which would be a better fit. We immediately thought, no. Those kids, they're exactly the ones that need us. They're the ones that if we don't come to them, and if we don't give them this program and build their self-efficacy, there's no chance they're ever going to get into university or into the world of computer science. So we identified our first groups with the help of the municipality, and we piloted our on-campus code teaching program. How does it work? I'm glad you asked. So, the municipality connects us with schools and neighborhood representatives, and we present our program to 8th graders. The children who choose to enroll in ForStart's annual program, they come to the Hebrew University campus once a week for a 3-hour session, and they learn how to code. During the first half of the year, they learn Python, the programming language. Then, during the second half of the year, they build their own project, from A to Z. Everything is their own. That's the first stage in building their self-efficacy and self-confidence, that they can actually do this, building their own project. So, at the end of year 1, we've got a cohort of accomplished 15-year-old Python programmers. They're invited back for year 2. In year 2, not only do they continue learning and develop their technical skills, they go back to their neighborhoods. They go back to 6th graders, and they teach them Scratch. Scratch is a very simple, visual, graphic programming language meant for children. And they teach it to them. They teach it within their own primary schools. Once you, as a 9th grader, has taught someone else how to program, obviously you can program. This is the second part of building their self-confidence. In year 3, participants, they already become assistants to computer science students and help teach the 8th graders. Hopefully, the year afterwards, they can already lead groups on their own. Throughout this process, children are gradually and supportively welcomed into the computer science family as equals. We've been watching this vision become a heartwarming and life-changing reality. But you don't have to believe us. You can listen to the kids and see it with your own eyes.
שאנחנו למדנו, שאתה מלמד, אתה רואה שהבנת את החומר.
זה מספק אותי ללמד יעדים אחרים, בגלל שזה נותן לי הרגשה טובה עם עצמי, שאני עושה משהו מהידע שלי ושהוא לא יישאר רק אצלי, שאני יכול לתרום לסביבה שלי.
הם צריכים להיות מודל לחיקוי עבור מישהו אחר, אז פתאום, רגע, אני צריכה להוביל.
You can watch more of that video later. So, now 4 years, only 4 years, and one wedding later. Many good stuff. But let's see what Start has reached. So to date, over 300 children have taken part from 17 different neighborhoods in Jerusalem. And we also already have 10 groups of youth instructed by youth. We have a group of ultra-Orthodox girls who found out in Start that they have a passion for computer science, and some actively decided that they wanted to improve math and English to become programmers because that's why when they realized it's important for the future. We have Arab-speaking groups of kids instructed by Arab-speaking students in the Hebrew University, opening up to a population that had a language barrier till now. We have a waiting list as long as Tzvi's arm of schools waiting to enroll their kids to the program. And we do our best to reach them because each of these kids is an entire world of opportunities waiting to be given a chance. Let me share with you two snapshots of 2 kids whose stories are with us as Start scales up. The first is of Michael, a high school dropout. He left school so he could work. These are true stories. So he could work, provide for his family. And we enrolled him in a special group of Starters who had dropped out of school. He attended the program and enthusiastically learned to code, and now he's 18 and he's looking to build a life for himself. And with his Start instructors, together, they're trying to apply for the Hebrew University pre-academic program. We hope he'll soon get a scholarship and get a fresh, promising start that can change the trajectory of his life. Second is Yossi. And he too dropped out of school and then enrolled to a school that provides second opportunities. We are so glad to work with that school. And during the forced out enrollment time, I made an introductory call. I told Yossi that his teachers had recommended him. And he said, really? Me? He was surprised, and so was I, because I said yes. They said, you're very curious, you're very passionate about computers. He confirmed that was true. And when I asked why didn't you sign up when we advertised in your school? And he answered that he doesn't have a computer. I made a deal. I told him, if I provide you with a computer, will you come? He agreed. He was a bit skeptic, but he agreed. And when I came to his school with a computer, his teachers had second thoughts. He's already addicted to his phone. And they declared that having a computer will just make his screen addiction worse. And we believe that someone who spends all his time on his phone could be the perfect candidate for our course. We compromised that I'd give him the computer and the school would set the limits. Okay, Yossi loved to code and he advanced rapidly. He asked for advanced challenges and he proved himself really clever. Now, this is a boy who's very passionate about technology, not so passionate about waking up early from school. But hey, that describes half of the students in the computer science department. So there you have it. In the right environment, the kids that the system thinks of as problematic could actually be a success story. Like they could be speaking here instead of me. And that's why we started Start, because we deeply believe that everyone can be a success story if given the tools and the gift of self-belief. Thank you very much. Yes. Actually, from next year, yes. But on that later.
So they said it should be a kind of 10-minute lighthearted speech, so I opened up to the book of Job, which is the story of the saintly man. Those unbelievable trials and tribulations as part of a wager between God and Satan to see if he'll stay steadfast in his belief. Now, much of the book is devoted to a series of discussions between Job and his three friends who try to convince Job that he must have sinned, and Job says, I'm not having any of that, thank you very much. And then out of nowhere comes a fourth friend who is not mentioned when the three friends are introduced at the beginning of the book, nor is he admonished at the end when God admonishes the three friends for not helping Job. And I thought we'd take a look at the way he explains why he juts into a conversation he wasn't really invited to. I'll read the verses out for you. Up spoke Elihu, son of Berachel the Buzite, and he said, Young am I in years, whereas you are elderly. That's why I was too timid and afraid to express my discourse to you. I thought the many of days should speak, the many in years should make wisdom known. There is, however, a spirit within mortals. Shaddai's breath gives them understanding. It is not the many of years who get wisdom, nor the old who understand custom. That's why I say, listen to me. I too will express my discourse. Where do you think the turning point in these verses is? Elihu starts out by saying why he doesn't talk and ends up by saying why he will, using the very same words. Where do you see the switch? And if anyone would like to share their thoughts now, that would be great. This is what happens in my 8th grade class after cocktails too, so, you know. Is there anyone or? Okay. So one of the things we can do is actually take a look at the way the text itself tries to point out where the turning point is. Note the three that's, that is, there is, and that is. It works a little bit better in Hebrew because you can really hear it. The three words are al ken, achen, and lachen. The other thing to look is for words that you see twice, like the words many and wisdom, that frame the turning point. Elihu butts into the conversation because there is a spirit within mortals. Now, the biblical text isn't exactly enamored of Elihu. He is described as a Buzite from the family of Ram. Now, granted, these are both Israelite names that you find in other places in the Bible, but Buz is from the word to degrade, and Ram means high, indicating how Elihu looks down upon the others. He's also described as the son of Berachel, which literally means to bless God. Sounds good, except that for the first few chapters of the book of Job, the word berach, to bless, is used in place of the word to blaspheme. On the other hand, Job has no answer to Elihu, and what Elihu says anticipates themes from God's response. So the text is a little ambivalent about Elihu's interruption, and that's because interrupting and joining into a conversation is tough. You can come off as vain, hasty, uppity. It takes that quintessentially Jewish and Israeli trait of chutzpah. Teaching Jewish studies, which is what I do, takes a lot of chutzpah. We're really telling our students there's this huge conversation out there about your identity, and it's been going on in books and art and culture for thousands of years, and you can take part in it. But the problem is we don't always mean that, because do we really think that our 8th graders can take part in the same conversation that Hillel and Shammai and Maimonides and Jacqueline Kahanoff took part in? Problem is, 8th graders have excellent built-in lie detectors. If as teachers we don't have enough chutzpah to say, yes, you can take part in this conversation, and if 8th graders don't have enough chutzpah to say, I too will express my discourse, probably in different words, and actually mean it, then Jewish identity and this whole discussion about it is always going to remain something that someone else decided that they need to study, and they will forget it as soon as possible. Teachers and students need chutzpah to enter into the conversation, which involves truly believing that there is a spirit within mortals, no matter how hard it is to apply those words to 8th graders after gym class, and no matter how vain, rash, or unworthy they appear. That chutzpah is something that I learned from my training in the Revivim program at Hebrew University for training teachers in Jewish studies, and I believe it can be a model for teacher training programs everywhere. I teach Jewish studies, history, and Bible at the Israeli Arts and Science Academy here in Jerusalem, mostly in the middle school. I studied in the Revivim program, through which I received my bachelor's in Bible and Jewish studies, a master's in Jewish history, and 3 years of hands-on teaching experience before receiving my teaching certificate. The standards of academic excellence in Revivim and the encouragement to pursue my own academic studies gave me enough chutzpah to join into the academic conversation. I wrote my thesis about the medieval preparations for Shabbat in Ashkenaz in the Middle Ages, and I have published 2 articles, a third on its way, and I'm starting a doctorate in the fall. Now, my students roll their eyes at me, in my face. Thank you. They roll their eyes about my interest in these topics, but they know that it's a living, ongoing conversation and that I am actually a part of it. The years of practical experience I gained in Revivim program gave me the chutzpah as a newly certified teacher to join into pedagogical discussions with teachers far more experienced than I, which led to my appointment as the pedagogical coordinator at my school. As part of my role, I help other teachers develop their teaching strategies and help them implement certain pedagogies we've decided as a school to pursue. I have enough chutzpah to advise other teachers because of the third unique aspect of Revivim, which is that you study in a close-knit group. From my first steps in the world of education, I had a peer group for consultation and a fair amount of commiseration, and I still have it. I have alumni at school who are Revivim alumni at school who are my colleagues, and we have active social media groups where there's always a wonderful idea to be had, and that's because of the many, many vantage points of the Revivim alumni. As of the beginning of this year, there were close to 200 Revivim alumni teaching in over 100 public schools in Israel throughout the entire country. We can and do talk about education endlessly to the quiet despair of our non-teacher partners, and all I really do as a pedagogical coordinator is help other teachers find what they're looking for in that conversation. If we want Jewish identity to be an important and thoughtful part in the lives of future generations, teachers and students need to be full and real participants in that conversation as researchers, as educators, and as learners, the way that Revivim trained us. And that, as Elihu taught us in the book of Job, takes a little bit of chutzpah. Thank you.
Well, that was amazing. And I hope you realize that the matchmaking facilities that the Hebrew University offers are open to all. So this is, take advantage of that. So thanks Ariela, Tzvi, Mor, and Michal. And now to the next topic. So how did Hippocrates and Aristotle think about the human body? Dr. Orly Lewis has launched the ERC-funded project Atomly, a visual and textual atlas, and we'll hear from her how it's possible to bring medicine from ancient Greece and Rome into the digital age. Orly, a senior lecturer in humanities, teaches classics in digital humanities with a focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. We will then enjoy a quick HUJI Bite, a short film featuring PhD student Shani Vaknin, who is straddling life sciences and brain sciences to work towards a cure for brain disorders. And our final speaker tonight is using the training she received at our Global International Development Program to address the global crisis most salient in our minds in headlines for the past few months. Alumna Michal Bar, head of Israel's Emergency Programming and Operations Department, will share her thoughts about her experience on the Ukraine border. Please.
Good evening. It's great to be here. So, when one opens one of the many ancient Greek and Roman medical sources, one encounters a confusing mass of technical terms and descriptions. One reads, for example, of vessels of different shapes and names, of parts lying behind or above one another, and detailed instructions on how to cut the body in order to observe these parts. These texts were clearly written by physicians and anatomists for a professional audience. And these verbal descriptions that we are reading rested on visual evidence gained from empirical observations of the body. But being an historian and a philologist, I was trained, like most modern readers of these sources, in studying texts and words, not the body. I realized that in order to understand these texts properly, I must bridge substantial, conceptual, visual, disciplinary gaps. And to do so, I set up a unique interdisciplinary team. A team with whom I can apply and am applying new methods, and with whom I can take my research beyond the long-standing textual and disciplinary boundaries. My team includes not only researchers of ancient texts, philologists and historians of science like myself, but also experts in modern anatomy, 3D modelers and illustrators, product experts, data scientists, software developers. And our daily in-depth collaboration allows us to apply a unique skill set which goes beyond the traditional methods of studying texts and to combine philology and history with computational, empirical, and digital methods. So let me take you through our new way of studying history of science. We begin by translating our texts. Now, a translation, we translate them into English. A translation is already one stage in deciphering the anatomical ideas. It is also, importantly, what facilitates the collaborative work of all team members. We are translating these texts through careful, close reading, as scholars have been doing for centuries. But we are also applying computational tools, including dedicated code written by our data scientists. And these computational tools help us deepen our understanding of the text and of this genre of ancient scientific writings. For example, by mapping lexical relations between different terms, or by mapping conceptual relations between different segments of the text. Once we have a translation, we turn to the anatomical deciphering, the collaborative anatomical deciphering. Together with our anatomists, they have the knowledge of anatomy gained from their long experience of looking inside the body, just as the ancient scientists were looking inside the body. We also perform dissections according to the instructions in our ancient texts. And we do this in order to see the body as the ancient scientists saw it. The ancient text guides us, but at the same time, the dissections, these collaborative discussions and analysis improved our translation and understanding of the text. With improved understanding of the text, we set out, together with our 3D illustrators, to model the ideas, to create a visual, digital, three-dimensional representation of the anatomy described in the ancient anatomical texts. Now, let me give you a brief example of why the collaboration and why the rendering in 3D, in visual 3D models are so important. So what you see here is a quote from a medical work written 2,500 years ago. And the author tells us that the brain of humans is double and that a thin membrane separates it in the middle. This anatomical point that he stresses is crucial for our author's attempt to prove that malfunction in the brain is the cause of epilepsy. But for me, or for anyone with my traditional disciplinary skill set, this is a fairly vague detail. I can imagine membranes of many shapes or many sizes running through the middle of the brain. The discussion and deciphering together with the anatomist and together with our illustrators led us to conclude that what we should model is this, that what the author is seeing and describing is a part which one can observe, really can observe in the brain, a sort of crescent-shaped, membrane-like structure. Now, this is one example of one part in one of dozens of treatises that we have. And a point to stress here is that in antiquity, unlike today, anatomy was still a dynamic field, a field in the making. There was no single standard anatomy, but diverse anatomies in the plural. Each author had his own set of ideas of the structure of the body and its parts, and his own terminology to express it. So we have many anatomies to decipher and many models to create. But it is not enough to simply create models. It was clear to me that these models need to be made accessible to researchers, and they need to be made accessible to them in a transparent manner, suitable to their scholarly needs, suitable, for instance, to the questions they are asking, or to their need to know the textual basis of our interpretive decisions leading to this model. And it is to this end that we have developed Atlamy, an interactive atlas of ancient anatomy. So let me show you a quick demo of the first version of this open access viewing and research platform, and what anyone, including you, can do with it. So what you see here is a model of the respiratory system according to Aristotle in the 4th century BC. You can turn it around, see it as you would be looking at the body from any direction. You can see the name of the part in Greek and its translation. You can fade a part to look deeper into the next layers. Or you can hide the part entirely and to really delve deeper and explore. If you click on a part, you'll see a short summary which explains to you the meaning of the term, its history. And you can click to go further and get further details and an extensive historical lexical discussion of the term. And you can also see a list of references which are so important for our researchers and for our users. You can search for a term in English or in ancient Greek. We'll suggest what we think you might be looking for. And once you click on a term and search for it, you'll see results in the 3D models which include this part, lexical terms which include it. You can filter, you can sort according to the author, the period, the anatomical system. And of course, from this page, you can go further back to a model or back into the lexical historical discussion. The range of viewing and study tools that I just showed you are the result of another important part in the work of my team, the product thinking. This is a concept which is fairly alien to academic research, certainly in the humanities, but a crucial one. Having product experts on our team who understand our research through the daily collaborative work, and who can also apply methods from the worlds of product and entrepreneurship. This is what allows us to understand the needs of researchers, the needs of other users, and it's what allowing us to design and tailor the interface according to these needs. It is what is allowing us to plan ahead, to create a sustainable platform, and ensure that this platform can continue to grow in content and to adapt to the needs of scholars from diverse fields. Because this atlas, these models, are just the beginning. It's a massive, but still an initial step to advance research, to advance the way we are doing research. And I bring this way of thinking and researching into my teaching as well. You can see here some of the results of this. I know this slide is overwhelming, but the ideas of students are overwhelming. These are only some of the ideas for digital resources designed by my students, for undergraduate and graduate students. And such projects are possible because I teach these students in the humanities faculty about the importance of collaboration with other fields, inside and outside academia, of the importance of creating new resources and new tools for humanistic studies. And I'm also working with other colleagues from different fields to combine the forces of ancient and modern science through virtual reality simulators, for example, or by improving machine learning and artificial intelligence. It is this reality that I've begun to create, and it is this reality that I seek to continue to create with my students, with my team, and with my colleagues here at the Hebrew University. And I invite you to take the first step into this reality by visiting our atlas and exploring ancient medicine in the digital age. Thank you.
My passion in science is about the brain. I think it's an amazing organ capable of incredible things. When I came to Mona's lab, I started working with this molecule called RNA, which basically gives us information about gene expression and how it's regulated and so on. We can use this information to diagnose very wide situation and diseases and disorders. I'm working with blood from patients, alive and dead actually, and I'm trying to find a way to use this RNA molecule to diagnose the disorder they're suffering from. My main study is actually about Parkinson's disease, where we work with both samples taken from a patient post-mortem who suffered from the disease for very long, usually about 30 years, and also from a dataset of the PPMI consortium by the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which collected samples from a live patient at the point of diagnostic and actually follow them up a few years going forward, which is an amazing opportunity because we can look what happened in the blood and in the brain after the person died, and then take it and look how it looks at the point of diagnosis. We thought that a disease so gigantic that affects so much of the person's life should have a biological marker also. This is where my second supervisor, Liran Carmel, comes in. I heard it's quite unique, but somehow I've been doing both the bench work, which is like working with all the tubes and the blood and extracting the RNA and performing qPCR and sequencing and everything, and also doing the computational analysis afterwards, which is what makes Liran and Mona such a great combination. I feel very hopeful that all of these amazing tools that we have here in the Hebrew University will help us finalize all the exciting studies we were working about, finding diagnostics and cures. I'm really excited to be a part of it.
How would you define resilience? In our global studies, it was the ability to bounce back after facing adversity. It turns out that truly serving a local community during emergency times can support them in bouncing forward, seizing new opportunities and achieving growth. Good evening, or good night. My name is Michal, and I'm excited to share with you how I was able to infuse community resilience concepts from my global masters into humanitarian work, specifically in the context of the Ukraine crisis, and how active local communities are the key to a thriving future. It took me a few years as a lawyer to understand who and what I would like to be. I couldn't imagine myself reviewing articles for the rest of my life. I knew I was a sprinter by nature, and I like lots of interactions and seek added value. And so I joined the Global Master's Program for Community Development at the Hebrew University. Over the past 6 years, since graduation, I've been dreaming, thinking, talking, and breathing humanitarian aid. As the Director of Emergency Operations at Israel, the leading Israeli NGO for humanitarian response and community resilience, I've responded to and supported over 20 emergencies around the world. From Hurricane Maria on the East Caribbean islands to massive floods in Kerala, India, from landslides in Zimbabwe to wildfires in California. Tonight, let's take a quick visit to the Ukraine crisis. It's still raging as we speak. It's one of the most significant humanitarian challenges facing the world today. Over 7 million Ukrainians have fled since late February, and 7 million more displaced internally. My team at Israel has been one of the first teams on the ground from the very first day. So how can we reconcile tragic facts like these with optimistic terms like opportunities and growth? At Israel, we believe that though each crisis is unique, all emergencies have 3 elements in common which can bring about opportunities for growth. Let's take a look at how each element is present in the Ukraine response. First, communities are the heroes of their own stories. That's always true, and even more so during emergency. During the immediate response, they are the first responders. A strong sense of solidarity leads to spontaneous volunteer initiatives. This is when you would find people who have nothing hosting refugees in their own homes, women running a soup kitchen from the back of their car. In the chaotic environment, like the environment of emergencies, they are the people who teach me what are the real needs. Following the stream of refugees coming out of Ukraine, my team arrived into Tolcha, Romania, a city at the delta between the Black Sea and the Danube River. A small group of Ukrainian and Romanian neighbors started a venture, collecting donations, vital items, to send up the river to the affected areas. As locals, they could quickly mobilize networks of volunteers, municipalities, and small and medium businesses to support the venture. And me, as a visitor who doesn't understand the language, the geopolitical context, or everyday life reality, and by the way, I have to finish saving the world and go back, pick up my kid from daycare, my only way to truly serve these people is by ensuring that they perceive themselves accountable, that they are willing to endorse bigger plans and can stay functional. They're the key to sustainable recovery because they're the ones who are staying. So if that is the case, what do they need me for or any other international humanitarian practitioner? They need us because large-scale events demand large-scale knowledge and resources. Which leads me to the second point for tonight that all international crises have in common. When something acute happens somewhere, the global spotlight shines on it, and resources and knowledge flow in. For a moment, they have the full attention they should seize while they can before the world goes back to business as usual. A complex emergency requires professional aid, experienced practitioners with specific know-how and lots of resources. In Ukraine, further to the beautiful local starting point, together we opened a logistic hub with a logistic corridor into the affected areas. By optimizing relief efforts, international organizations, governments, and municipalities across the world became able to move in aid into more than 10 municipalities in the clashing zones. What did we ship in? Whatever the communities and officials were asking for. And so far, over 500 trucks with more than $25 million worth of food, medications, and medical supplies. Through the comprehensive response, we are introducing Ukraine's stakeholders to the Israel-developed supply chain optimization system based on Israeli tech and know-how. We are using the system to ensure that the right people are serving the needed communities with the right aid. This knowledge and tools introduced during the crisis can be leveraged by Ukraine for its recovery and long-term goals, like export optimization, inventory management, and improving economic efficiency. To ensure a community not only survives, bounce back, but even is able to recover and rebuild, bounce forward, element number 3 teaches us to leverage the fact that local communities are more receptive and willing to discuss change during the crisis and right afterwards. This is a natural human reaction. When it ain't broken, we don't fix it, right? Crisis shuffles everything we rely on, making us questioning some of the fundamental assumptions of our lives. This is when we are willing to admit we weren't fully prepared. But now, since we have experienced the damages, we are open to learn to be better prepared for the next time, especially where crisis is a recurring event. In the Ukraine, with the mass draft of men, we are seeing the disintegration of the family unit. The vast majority of refugees are women and children. I've met them at the Palanka crossing point. In the heavy late February snow, you could see coated mothers and children looking for their next destination. Who would like to help them? Who is willing to help them? One of the main concerns is that in this situation, they are most vulnerable and need the protection. They are often targeted for human trafficking. Protecting women and children from the risks of human trafficking has been a sensitive issue in Eastern Europe long before the current crisis. The crisis just amplifies the risk and the scope of an issue already challenging a region where a woman can be bought, trafficked, and abused. One of the first steps supporting refugees in Moldova was to build a safe haven, a child-friendly space for those children to be while their parent is trying to figure out their new reality. Our experts identified unaccompanied minors, devised referral pathways, trained Moldovan social workers and civil society organizations to raise awareness, and all these in order to prevent trafficking. The crisis here serves as a foot in the door. Professionals are here to alleviate war suffering, but can also support communities seeking to address and prevent sexual and gender-based violence. Encountering humanitarian crises on a daily basis is heartbreaking, but I feel privileged to leverage my knowledge to help those most affected, to indeed bounce not only back, but even forward, and prepare the ground for a better future. We at Israel, we say that we are very fast to arrive, but slow to leave. We stay to ensure that the resources, the know-how, the lesson gained during the initial response and through the relief will be there to support recovery and strengthen community resilience, allowing open discourse and providing conditions for local communities and local leadership to thrive, bringing in resources and leveraging the guidance of international experts when local communities are open to change, all together can create the opportunities for growth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If that doesn't move you, I don't know what will. And ladies and gentlemen, the good news is that the only thing that is standing between you and dessert are my closing remarks, which will be no longer than 45 minutes, Yossi, don't worry. So thanks, Orly, Shani, and Michal. This has really been some evening. What an impressive group of young people. Wouldn't you agree that the future is looking brighter already in the hands of the leaders of tomorrow? Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for joining us tonight and for your ongoing support, which, as you can see, is doing a world of good. You're now welcome to join us for dessert. Wishing you all a good night.